Welcome to lecture number 62. The topic is 6.8, Immigration and Migration in the Gilded Age. The theme is Migration and Settlement. The learning objective for today is to explain how cultural and economic factors affected migration patterns over time. The first key concept says the industrial workforce expanded and became more diverse through internal and international migration. Immigrants in this time period primarily came from Southern Europe and Eastern Europe. The reasons for coming varied and can be categorized into push and pull factors. Southern Europeans came seeking economic opportunities, a pull factor. Migrants from Italy and Greece fall into this category and make the bulk of the birds of passage. That means that they have intentions of going back to their original country and using the money that they saved up in the United States to improve their lives in their home country. The work that they'd taken on in the United States was often unskilled wage labor since most were coming from pretty rural backgrounds. Not all birds of passage follow through with their intention of going back, while others go back and forth multiple times, making it impossible to put an exact number of how many migrants come to the U.S. in this period. Eastern Europeans were often Jews who were fleeing pogroms, a push factor. In 1881, there was a rise of coordinated attacks against Jews in Europe. These immigrants settle in cities and are often being used as scabs or strike breakers. Scabs are workers who management would call in anytime that workers would start a boycott or strike. To try and get the original workers to stop striking, they would bring in temporary workers who they would pay the same wage or lower to show the strikers that they are replaceable. The work that the Eastern European migrants took on was more varied, though. They adapted well to the urban environments and set up shops that supplied services like tailors or seamstresses. They opened their own businesses to cater to ethnic enclaves or people of similar backgrounds. Finally, Chinese migrants in the West Coast worked in the railroad industry. Before they came to the United States, they most often had a labor contract already established before leaving China that was on average 5 years long. At the end of that work contract, they had the option of returning or to renew their contract. The growth in Chinese workers in the West, coupled with difficult economic times, results in legislation banning further Chinese migration to the U.S. The next key concept is split up into two parts. The first part says, as cities became areas of economic growth featuring new factories and businesses, they attracted immigrants from Asia and Southern and Eastern Europe, as well as African American migrants within and out of the South. Migrations in the 19th century are referred to the first wave of immigration and the second wave of immigration. We've already covered the first wave of migration in the previous unit. Most migrants then came from Ireland, Germany, and the UK. We covered the various places they settled and the nativist response they got when they arrived. Irish and German migrants will still continue their migrations to the end of the 19th century, though they were outnumbered by this second wave of immigration that came from Southern and Eastern Europe. There was a variation on the settlement of the first wave of migrants, while in this wave all migrants predominantly settle in cities. African Americans in this time period start their migration out of the rural areas into urban areas, and some leave the South to escape Jim Crow laws and growing discrimination. An example of this is the group Exodusters, who settled in Kansas. However, this migration does not equal the levels that are seen in the Great Migration later on in the 1910s. The second part of the key concept says many migrants moved to escape poverty, religious persecution, and limited opportunities for social mobility in their home countries or regions. This part of the key concept reiterates the push factors that some migrants sought to escape. Jews escaped violence from pogroms in Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine, and Poland. Pogroms in Russia were caused by the assassination of Alexander II in 1881 that was blamed on Jews and led to violence directed against them. The economic conditions in Southern Europe were poor and land was scarce. Italian immigrants who were looking to buy their own piece of land in their home country did not have the resources to do so, so they came to the United States, saved money or sent money back in remittances, and then allowed their family to buy that piece of property. A lot of immigrants who came to the United States had every intention of returning, but sometimes they just happened to stay because of the better economic opportunities. In 1892, Ellis Island opened up in New York City to receive new migrants. It's used as a screening point to make sure that those that are coming in are complying with the new regulations that have been passed throughout the 19th century as a response to the nativist sentiment. The last key concept says urban neighborhoods based on particular ethnicities, races, and classes provided new cultural opportunities for city dwellers. Ethnic neighborhoods rose out of this new immigration. New migrants that would arrive would go to where other migrants from the same country had already settled. They would help each other find places to live, find employment, and as each group gained economic advancement, the neighborhood's makeup would change as newer immigrants would take the place of the older immigrants, as the immigrants that had been there for several years are now able to find better employment and live in better parts of the city. There's pros and cons to this concentration of people in the cities. Migrants were able to retain cultural practices like language and religion. It facilitated political organization. Once migrants are naturalized citizens, the Irish, for example, used political machines to their advantage. Bosses of political machines would often be friendly towards immigrants because they knew that eventually they would become voters, and they would vote for the party machine that helped them establish themselves in the new country. A drawback to this concentration in ethnic neighborhoods is that they were often very poor and very crowded conditions, were unhygienic, as seen in the images taken by Jacob Riis. The association of migrants with the dirty cities created a negative perception of immigrants and leads to another wave of anti-immigrant sentiment. Suburbs do begin to develop, but they're rather small, but as rail service expands out of the city, those who are able to afford it are able to commute in and out of the city. And finally, here's the recap. A second wave of immigration came from Southern and Eastern Europe. Immigrants from Southern Europe often take up unskilled work in factories. Immigrants from Eastern Europe had come with trades that could have been utilized in urban areas. And finally, new immigrants settled primarily in cities and developed unique ethnic communities. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, you can click on the video link on the screen. And if you're looking for more practice to help you on the AP exam, you can visit apushslides.com. I wish you the very best in all of your studying and look forward to seeing you back on the next lecture.